In Lesson A2, we'll look at the development of three major theoretical approaches to sociology. In order to do so, we first have to understand some of the major changes in the history of human societies. What do we mean when we say society? It's a bit like the air we breathe. It's all around us, keeping us alive and always under pressure, but we're hardly aware of it most of the time. While the workings of any given society are complex, society as a concept is relatively simple. A group of people living in the same space who are similar enough to interact meaningfully, and do so relatively independently from people outside. Pinning down exactly where one society stops and another begins can be tricky, however, since what we might label a society can range in size from a small self-sufficient family group to whole countries that share a language and government, to a global society that shares an ecosystem, an economy, and cultural universals, which we'll be talking about in the next module. That said, human societies, and arguably global society as a whole, have tended to change in similar ways over time. We all started out in small family tribe societies, hunting and gathering, living nomadically as we followed the naturally growing food from place to place. But starting around 12,000 years ago, most of those societies started to settle in one place and grow their own food in shifts we call the agricultural revolution. Most societies in written history were primarily agricultural, until just a few hundred years ago when some societies began to experience another major shift towards industrialization, moving into denser populations that used machines to produce food and other goods. Some people still live as hunter-gatherers, and that lifestyle has some distinct advantages, including an often healthier diet and more free time to spend with family. But growing your own food also had benefits, including a more reliable food supply, greater security and stable living situations, and some increasing levels of technology as people settled in one place and could work together to develop new ideas from writing to metalsmithing. While agricultural revolutions were major shifts from the nomadic lifestyle, agricultural societies still shared much in common with other pre-industrial people. Most people lived in rural settings, farming with their families, and teaching their children everything they needed to continue a similar lifestyle. The shift to agriculture led to new philosophical viewpoints, as a small aristocratic elite were freed from the work of survival and could take new roles of managing a larger agricultural society or figuring out how to better manage them. These philosophers tended to see society as a divine institution governed by universal laws. Like the annual seasons of farming, society moved in cycles, running smoothly as long as everyone did their jobs the way their parents had taught them. Change happened very slowly in these societies, as most people only interacted with a small number of friends and family members who produced most of what was needed with the resources around them. Major changes were seen as threatening to the stability of society and the traditional cycles of life. But gradual changes around the world led to another major shift, as the Industrial Revolution made use of new machines that could produce newer and cheaper goods. New sources of energy bypassed the need for muscle power, and new social structures seemed to change society for the better, at least for some. Industrialization led to more and more people living in crowded urban cities, surrounded by and working with strangers from far away, needing new education for new jobs in factories, and selling new goods in growing markets. In these societies, change happened faster and faster with each new development in technology and globalization. So with the Industrial Revolution, life got more and more complex as people came to rely on a larger number of people to survive, adopting new ways of life and new technologies to continue moving forward. But these changes made it harder to rely on the old philosophers' universal laws and cycles. How does society adapt to such changes and still function and make sense? Auguste Comte was born into a changing France, and he called for a new approach to understanding our social world, which he called sociology. He said our understanding of society required the same scientific approach that had led to new understandings of the natural world, an understanding based not on casual observation, but on positive facts. Sociology simply means the scientific study of society, examining our world in detail and taking nothing for granted. Just because tradition says things are a certain way means they'll always be that way, or that they must always be that way. Batman fights criminals. Sociologists figure out why crime exists, and what can be done to stop people from ever becoming criminals to begin with. Harriet Martineau is known as the mother of sociology because she took Comte's ideas and figured out how to put them into action. She wrote the first books on social research and actual societies in practice, and understood the need to study all aspects and members of human society, from the rulers to the servants. Sociology asks us to use our sociological imagination to see how individual people and events fit into their larger social world, how our history and circumstances shape us, but also how we shape the future. For example, divorce is a private decision between two people, right? Yet, using our sociological imagination, we can see that this private decision happens more often in some societies than in others. And within one society, people make that choice more or less often depending on other changes happening around them. As women gained more opportunity to earn their own living, control their reproduction, and escape abusive partners, men spent more time away from their family at new jobs, and people began to live longer, and cultural ideas around marriage were shifting. People seemed to make that private decision more and more frequently, and that private decision in turn affects the lives of their children and others in society. Children from single-parent families suffer higher rates of poverty, are more likely to fall into crime, and have more difficulty maintaining their own romantic relationships in the future.